Hi everyone,
Hello.
welcome to this new 2.16 live stream. So we'll go over some of the new features in the 2.16 that we would like to showcase. Just jump right in. So the first announcement, if I may say that, is that if you took a look at the previous PopcornFX versions we released, in 2.14 we introduced a BAT animation texture generation tool, and we showcased that using as a crowd stadium demo. We took some time to polish the effect we created for that demo, and it's now a free package that you will find on the marketplace, so it will be out today or tomorrow. It's used as it can be seen as an example package to learn how we made that demo. I should mention that the Unreal Engine project that you can see on the right is not shipped with that as part of the PopcornFX package. It's only the PopcornFX source effect that you can see on the left. I'd like to thank Realusion for providing us with the assets that we use for that demo. So feel free to check out their marketplace. There are lots of cool meshes and animations. Other news, so on the Unity side, we have now built-in support for build versions. So it's basically a built-in way to load the effect for different platforms. You can see maybe hardly on the top left here, the effect is loaded in low quality. On the top right here, it was loaded in Unity's medium quality. Bottom left is ultra, and bottom right is PS4. So if you author your effect using build versions, it's now a built-in thing in the plugin. Another thing is the thumbnail support. So you can, if you import your effect in Unity, you will have the static thumbnails and animated thumbnails working by default. So you can see them in the content browser and various Unity panels, like selecting an effect, you will see the thumbnails by default. So this is a feature in 2.15, but it's also present in 2.16. We added a very early version of an FX profiler, so it displays all of the effects present in a level, sorts them by particle count, instance count, and displays their timings. We will improve the look of it over the coming versions, but that's a first shot. So it's present in both versions. Yeah, and last Unity related feature, at last we have Unity light particles supported in Unity. It does come with limitations, so I should mention them. I'm not a Unity expert, but basically in Unity we cannot spawn an infinite number of light components. So we're using a pooled light component system. So we have a pool of game objects basically with Unity light components on them, and the plugin is assigning for each of the components a particle light and its properties, like its color and such. There are some limitations in legacy and URP render pipelines. An object, for example this sphere here, cannot be affected by more than 8 lights. So it's a hard-coded limitation, we cannot do anything about that. But the video you see here is for the HDRP, and it's captured in an HDRP package. And from what I understand, they use a light grid system, which also has a fixed, a maximum number of lights per cell, but it works slightly better. So yeah, light particles in Unity. A small editor UI and UX changes. So the BAT export window, the window you saw you can access through the mesh viewer, was slightly improved. It now checks if the animations you specified are compatible with the mesh, the skeleton of the mesh you want to create a BAT from, if that makes sense. So you can see some errors, just a few minor changes, but it made our lives easier for creating the crowd package. You might have seen in the documentation or on the renderer properties itself feature sets. This is now gone. We renamed everything in the SDK, so SDK users will be affected by this change to material. So just set a material to your particle renderers and that's it. Yeah, so double-sided, we had a mismatch between Unity and PopcornFX editor viewport. PopcornFX viewport was always rendering mesh particles as double-sided. The Unity plugin was not, so we just make that more clear in 2.16. All of the default mesh materials now have a double-sided feature enabled by default, and if you uncheck it, it will work in Unity correctly. And all engines actually. Yeah, minor change too on the editor's preferences side. So if your PopcornFX editor viewport picked up the D3D11 API, for example, if your card did not pick up D3D12, support D3D12, sorry, and you wanted to enable a layer to be run on GPU, it was basically fallbacking to CPU. This option was unchecked. So now we're a bit more confident about the state of D3D11 in PopcornFX viewport. So we made that default. And the last change in terms of settings is a preferred sim location on the project settings side. It's now gone. It was remapping on the layer if you specified auto. And here it's if you set GPU, for example, if it was trying to compile to GPU all of those layers. So this was, anyway, this does not work anymore. If you want a layer to run on GPU, just set it to run on GPU on your layer.
Yeah, we basically changed the way we saw the GPU simulation fallback or how it should become a GPU simulation on a layer. Now we decided to always have it explicit. So if you want a layer to run on GPU, you have to explicitly set it in the Popcorn editor, and there is no try auto promoting layers to GPU if possible, because this is just too risky. There is not enough control, and usually you don't want to do that because it will also move to GPU some very small layers where the overhead of running them on GPU is way worse than actually running them on CPU. So yeah, we thought it might be a good idea at first when we started implementing the GPU sim, but now we realize it's not, so that's why we're removing this.
So yeah, last thing in terms of static presentation. So we finally had some time to look into our GPU sorter implementation for the editor rendering code. So I'm not mentioning that about the runtime GPU sim code. Basically, that's the sorter we use for ribbons sorting and sorting of billboard particles, like alpha blended or pre-multiplied alpha particles. And as you can see here, so the bottom timeline does not have the same scale as the top timeline, but we basically went from 6.2 milliseconds approximately to like 1.7 for 500K GPU ribbons. So like a 3 or 4 times performance improvement. It's a bit hard to see. And with those findings, we plan to bring those modifications to the runtime code, namely the spatial layers, which are also using a sorter, a radix sorter. So yeah, basically rendering GPU particles in the editor should be faster, and it will impact the SDK later on. The memory inspector view you have in the content browser, all of those are actually using internal helper classes for listing the effect effect memory layout. And now all of those are exposed to the SDK. So if you, for example, Unreal Engine has a similar asset view, if your engine does have similar thing, you can implement it. And what's nice is that you have access to that per platform, so you can see the final memory footprint on disk of your FX platform. So yeah, let's switch to live demo. Yes, so what I'd like to show is a crowd package. So the crowd package will come with so the crowd effects and 3 example effects that I will go over a bit later. After, I mean. So what we did basically, so I'd like to mention that at first, is that the BAT generation tool is not engine agnostic right now. We have some problems with mismatches of the skeleton layout after importing an FBX file in PopcornFX editor versus doing the same in Unreal, for example. So I need to state that if you try to import this effect right now in Unreal Engine, the meshes will be completely broken. You will need to import the T-pose mesh files and the animation mesh files in Unreal, re-export them so Unreal has time to sanitize the way it does, and then export them to the project as an FBX file and regenerate the BAT. So it's a very tedious process. We plan to work on that in future versions. I mean, actually find a more stable solution. But still, in the meantime, you can take a look at this effect, see how we set it up, and have fun with it. You can see the meshes are using a custom material. There are a bunch of attributes. I will not go over into each of them, but the way it works is that you can place your effect either using an animation track spline. So yeah, if I hit that, yeah, I will pause the effect. So if I hit that, it will use this spline specified here that can be overridden in the final engine. We use that because in Unreal, for example, the stadium we used couldn't have we couldn't place using the order method nicely, so having both is nice. Anyways, so if I uncheck that, it uses one of the new templates from this package, which is called Spawn Crowd Grid. It exposes a few parameters like the angle, height, number of people, and like the spawn probability if you want to introduce a bit of noise in some of the corners. So, yeah. And some actually I will reduce the spawn count a bit. And yes, some horizontal jittering to break the very uniform, I mean, to break the visually uniform placement of those crowd people. Yes, there's other attributes like the jersey colors and stuff like that. Each of the team has 2 colors, so they are exposed here. And there are some controls for like should we randomize the team, or they are all like it's the first team or the second team. Yeah, should we randomize the jersey pattern or make it so for example here I can tweak pattern like that, or here. And also in some stadiums usually you have some people wearing the football jerseys, and in sometimes you will have people not wearing them, so you can uncheck that option and increase or decrease the probability of people wearing a jersey of the team. Yes, you can have fun playing that, see how we created all of that logic in the effect. I will not go over each of the nodes because it will take too much time, but the idea is that it switches between, for each particle, between a mesh, so each particle select whether it's a male or female mesh. We'll go into this template. There are 2 mesh renderers. Select the LOD level, I don't know, the jersey pattern, colors, and stuff like that. If it's too far away, you can visualize the different LOD levels here by tweaking the LOD bias. I don't know if you can see it, but
maybe zoom a lot on one of them. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is the last LOD level of the mesh, and finally Impostor. So So yeah, if you just keep it that way, it's using a distance-based switch between impostors and meshes.
Also, right now in the effect, the imposters look very ugly lighting-wise. So depending on how you rotate, it's super ugly. This is because they are lit as the flat plane of the billboard they're on, and we did not generate the normal map textures. But in what Hugo will show you afterwards on how to generate the imposters, you can easily pick normal map. We just didn't do it right now. Maybe we'll do it when we release the package on the marketplace, but yeah, that's why they're lit flatly.
Yeah, so you can find in the materials folder of the craft package the materials we use, so the one for the meshes and the one for the impostors. They are just a subset of the default mesh and impostor materials that you can use as reference on how could you create some pre-visualization materials in PopcornFX editor. They are not exported to the engine as a reminder, but still good to see the effect in the viewport. So the other not feature but part effects of that package are the pre-set up impostors generation effects. So they are we now have an experimental tool in the effect editor to generate impostors. So I will open this one. If you open it, you will see just a T-pose mesh. It's a single particle, infinite life with the mesh we use. If you want to generate an impostor, you need to find a new super hidden setting. So in the editor preferences, effect editor, under backdrops, advanced, enable that option. And here you will see a new frame exporter backdrop. So yeah, to avoid taking too much time and going into detail because it's still experimental, but the idea is that you can specify destination folder, name of your file name, of your texture, type, flipbook dimensions, image dimensions, what types of map you want to export. So the diffuse map, the normal, or PopcornFX editors like roughness, metalness, or the lit impostors. And in camera path, you specify, by default, it was in previous versions, it was considered viewport, which is pretty much what the thumbnail capture does. So it captures this area, it setups the camera with a static FOV and captures the mesh from here. But if you select one of these, it will take basically whatever is in the level in terms of particle, grab the bounds and position the camera correctly and rotate around that object to take all of the positions. So you can try that, heat render generates a bunch of textures that you can see here. So what we call static one dimensions are just capture a static object, so it does not consider it to be animated, and rotate around the yaw axis, so around up. You can see all the camera orientations. The static 3-dimension impostor rotates around the yaw and the pitch axis. So, and those are all maps compatible with the impostors template present in the Houdini package on the PopcornFX marketplace. So they are all in the same format as what Houdini would output, basically. And the animated one, so this one is a bit big. So it rotates around you, and for each of the columns, it's going to be each of the frames of an animation. So yeah, you just generate those currently from PopcornFX editor. It's a bit a hack workflow, but it works. So for example, here I disable the mesh, and I enable this single billboard particle using one of these textures, and it works. So this one is lit, I think. And actually it's lit, but yeah, flat normal map, so same problem. but you could from the 3D mesh ask to dump the diffuse map, normal map, whatever you need to render your impostors in the final engine. So yeah, this is an experimental feature. Right now it kind of only works with particles at the world origin, so transparent particles, not really sure if it's going to work in all cases. Yeah, at least it works with impostors, and it helped us tremendously for the crowd demo to have a tool in PopcornFX editor directly for that. So that's all for the crowd package. Yeah, last thing I'll show, and then let Julian continue. So if you followed the previous 215 changelog, you saw that we added a debug.draw line helper, draw value helper, sorry. So this one, and we just added the debug.draw line this time. So those particles here are drawing a line between each of those two, so I can show how it works, but there are, for each of those lines, two simulated particle positions, each with a different color, and it draws a line between the two. Basic, you can specify the start and end colors, so that's why you have this gradient. And then on top of that, the debug draw vector, draw basis, and draw box, which are just additional templates building from the debug draw line templates. Yeah, so as for the previous draw value feature, those are not exported in the final game. In shipping, they disappear, so it's no overhead feature for you. And that option, which is necessary because if it's disabled, sorry, you don't see anything. If you check it, it saves the state of that option. So reopening that effect keeps it enabled if you had it enabled. Yeah, that's all for that.
Yeah, and previously you might have seen in the tutorial package effects that were displaying numbers, such as these, but these were templates that used actual billboard renderers to draw the numbers. It had a huge overhead when you use them in inside layers, whereas all these are built-in functions, so a single instruction when the graph is compiled, it's super lightweight. So yeah, in the future we plan to add more of these inside the templates of the core library, such as the physics template, and we'd like to see how to integrate these better with the editor. For example, when you hover node, or if you press a key to show the debug on a specific node. Yeah, so there are more things to come with respect to that. But yeah, that's the main change compared to the old ones that were using billboards. Now it's simple functions.
I forgot to mention last detail, so this is only implemented for the CPU simulation right now. The GPU simulation debug.draw, line, vector, basis, and box are fallbacking to the old implementation using a capsule billboard stretched.
Okay, so I'll quickly show you a new feature in the editor backdrops, and this is the addition of cascaded shadow maps. So some people have asked us for this for quite some time, and it's finally there. So if you select the directional light backdrop, you now have shadow options. So by default it's on, and you can enable some debugging that shows the cascades, tweak stuff like the resolution if you want lower resolution shadows, shadow bias, whatever. And also we have some variance shadow maps in there that are off by default because we thought it would be nice to have soft shadows, but we didn't take that much time to properly tweak them. It's very scene dependent, they have some weird artifacts, so yeah, we prefer to by default have the simple cascade shadow maps. which are more stable, basically. Anyway. So I'll also show you a bunch of new things in the node graph. So we have a new, regarding colors, a new Luminance node. This was kind of a last-minute addition, but yeah, it takes a color, outputs the luminance. You have different modes of luminance. Regarding colors, we also added a pretty neat thing in the color picker. If you wanted to set colors to be some specific values, like some pure greens or whatever, you had to tweak those sliders here to be sure that you did not have any other components. Well, we simply added a snap to grid. So when you press control, you now have a grid without control, with control, and it works for everything, even the saturation. There, it also works for the other visualizations of the color picker. You have that snap to grid. So pretty small change, but I like it personally. Also, when you drag a wire and drop it, before 2.16 you could type plus or multiply or divide, whatever, to drop like add more div nodes. Now in 2.16 you can type plus and a value, so let's say plus 12.5 or whatever, and the editor will automatically fill the second input with that. You can also type things like 5 plus, and it will wire it into the second input and put the constant up there. We also added that for rand nodes, so if you type, let's say, minus 0.5 question mark 0.5, it will drop a rand node between minus 0.5 and 0.5. So pretty neat to make graphs quicker with less clicks. If I go back in there, we also added an event blocker node on the event templates, so maybe I'll show that in another effect like this one. Yeah, so here, if I control space and type event blocker, so this allows me to block the events, and when block is false, the events just pass through, but then I can wire something like, let's say, block if a random between 0 and 1 is greater than 0.5. So now I have half of the particles. If I say 0.05, I only have very few particles. So in this example, it's a bit dumb to do that. You would just drop a second multiplier and set the proper rate, but sometimes in some event templates, you might not have control on the input events, and you might want to do that. It's kind of similar to the event divider that allows you to divide by a fixed rate. So here, if I want 1 every 4 particles or 4 events, I just type 4, it divides the input event rate by 4. But this gives you more control, the event blocker.
Yeah, for like effects supposed to be simplified for different platforms also.
Yeah, definitely. You can add a platform check, a version check, or whatever you want, an attribute that you set and use to conditionally block parts of effects. Yeah. We also did a pass on the documentation of some nodes of the template library. So now most nodes should have their pins and their node descriptions available. And when you hover a template in 2.16, you can see a tooltip with the description of the template. So yeah, effect age, physics. If I type HSV to RGB, I get the documentation of the node there on the tooltip. Same for the outputs. So yeah, we did a small documentation pass there. And also on all the event nodes of the template library, you now have an enabled pin. So you can kind of see it as like the event blocker. But yeah, it's for all the other all the other templates, you can conditionally enable or disable them. Another neat little thing. So to disable nodes, you could hit Control-T or toggle. And if you wanted to disable multiple nodes, you would have to select them, hit Control-T, and it would disable all of them. But if they are in an annotation, like this big annotation here, where those two nodes are in, now if you select the annotation and Control-T on the annotation, it will toggle all the nodes inside. So that's a quicker way to toggle nodes that are placed inside annotations. Also we noticed on some effects made by users that they tended to do things like construct a random value from multiple different rands. So things like take 3 rands, build a 3D vector out of those three rands. And this was not detected and optimized by the graph compiler. So now we change that. Now the graph compiler is able to detect this, and it will collapse those multiple rands into a single one. So here you can see that I only have a single float3 rand at spawn with the proper values. So yeah, little optimizer detail there. And finally, regarding optimizations, there was the dxdt node, which is the time derivative node. So if you take the particle position and you take the time derivative of that position, it will output the particle velocity, basically. So I'll just quickly show that with a debug.draw vector.
This one might come from the
Oh,
user.
draw vector, my bad, crap. Debug draw vector. Right. So yeah, here you see I plug the time derivative node inside there. It gives me the particle velocity. So of course I could just take the physics and grab the velocity and wire that in directly, and it would give me the exact same thing. But the point here is to use that inside subgraphs or templates where you do not have the information. So let's say the trail node, for example, you wire in just the position. Well, depending on the interpolation settings you set on the trail node, it will need the velocity, and it will use that node internally to reconstruct the velocity from just the position. And it works obviously for anything else here. I'm just using position as an example, but you wire in color, it will return the rate of change of the color based on however you compute the color. If you sample a color curve or a color gradient or whatever, it will return the color change. So not trying not to go into too much of a tangent there. So basically this node, there was a bug before 2.16 that caused it to not compute the analytical derivative of the input from the physics node, because there are lots of computations that get optimized out in the physics node, but it was confusing the code that computed the derivative of the graphs anyway. So it was generating suboptimal code and fallbacking to the frame derivative. So it was using a finite difference, which is less correct than the analytical derivative. Long story short, we fixed the bug. Now everything is great. Little birds are chirping. The sun is shining. People are happy. Yeah. dxdt node fixed. Anyway, so that's all for me, I think. Yes. Maybe we can go take a look if there are any questions. How was GDC? Oh, yes. That's what we forgot. We need to talk about GDC. So yeah, GDC was great, actually.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we saw a lot of people on the booth. Some of us went to yeah, maybe switch back to the cam. We saw some cool talks. Yeah, it was overall a good GDC. So thanks for everyone that came by our booth and said hello. And we'll see you next year at the next GDC. Yep.
Yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. We can answer now.
Yep. There is always a bit of a bit of lag between when we talk and when you see the actual thing. So we'll wait a bit in case there are questions. And if there are no questions, as usual, we can do as usual. We have the Discord channel. Feel free to go there.
Right, no question. We can wrap up.
Yep. Okay.
Let's switch to the like demo and can back and forth.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in, and check out version 2.16.
Yeah.
The builds should be up either today or tomorrow. Yep. We'll post the link on Discord and on the various social media channels. Anyway.
Yeah, and if you have any questions, we are on Discord as always.
Yep.
Come and ask any questions. We'll be happy to answer. Bye.
Bye-bye.